saying it like I missed the button. Okay, try that. Okay. Yeah, now we're recording.
Hi guys, thanks for joining us today. We've had a couple of minutes to go ahead and to get familiarized with who's in the room and the departments that you represent. We have a good cross-section of folks today. We have some people that are the very first front line with our front desk, people that provide direct services, as well as some of the support staff that help make sure that our machine continues to move forward. As I've mentioned, I'm part of the National Trainers certification process, so this is being recorded so that we can review it. We have angled the camera so that nobody is directly in front of the camera. We're going to go ahead and jump into the curriculum. We've got a pretty dense schedule today. You're going to see on your Roma timeline here. It kind of outlines what our goal will be. There's a stack of them. If you don't have one in front of you, please go ahead and pass it around, as well as a number of different inserts that we're going to be using because there's been some updates from the participant manual. So, with the beginning of this process, we're going to introduce you to the participant manual, which you all have a wonderful copy of right there. At the beginning of the participant manual, you'll see that there are 10 questions, okay? There's a page with 10 questions. And this is really our first step in establishing what a baseline is, okay? This is the baseline of our knowledge so that we know where we start from and can evaluate where we end up as the day goes on. I'm going to start talking a little bit about the curriculum, but if you can just review those 10 questions and go ahead and put some answers down, that would be awesome. These are true, false, and they're located right before page 1, okay? This workbook is broken down into different modules. Each of these modules have some learning objectives at the very beginning. With those learning objectives, we'll review those at the end of the module, and it helps us define kind of what our roadmap is for this period of time as we move forward. Has everybody found what we're looking for right now with the 10 questions and the module number 1? Okay, we're going to jump into module number 1. This is really our opportunity to hear about what community action is, where community action started, and how it's led us to how we currently operate and are governed. So, with module number 1 on page 1, Sean, are you able to read me the learning objectives there, please?
The learning objectives?
Yes.
On page 4, sorry.
On page 1.
Participants will be able to identify historical milestones of community action and understand how these relate to Roma implementation. Participants will learn that community action agencies with a focus on family agency and community outcomes have always been designed to be more than simply direct service providers. Participants will understand how lessons from history can help us identify future actions.
Awesome, thank you so much. So I'm going to go ahead and add an additional learning objective because as you saw, we have some inserts that we're going to add into our manual at the end here. So there are some additional timelines. The additional learning objective is that we're going to acknowledge the 2017 National Theory of Change and the Performance Management Framework. So there's been some changes within the network that have postdated the publication of this manual. Let's start off with page number 2. On page number 2, we're going to just start with this timeline of what community action is. Community action started in 1964. This is the same year as the Civil Rights Act, the same year that the legislation was passed that started Head Start. It was Lyndon Johnson's War on Poverty. We were all part of that package. And at that time in 1964, it was the Economic Opportunity Act, which really defined what community action is. It's cool because at this point they were able to say, you know what, we're going to have a 3-part focus. This focus is going to be on family, on agency, as well as community. We're going to hear that over and over today. Family, agency, community. Those are the 3 points, and if you look at the cover of your manual, you'll see all of those interact. Okay? So the focus was established that we're going to really concentrate our efforts on improving self-sufficiency for families who are of lower income. We're going to do things that strengthen our communities. We're going to work in partnership with other organizations, but then also that we as an agency are going to be accountable for the work that we do so that we can report out on the outcomes that we actually accomplish. So again, this is 1964 Economic Opportunity Act. This is enacted. We start the process of what community action is. We fast forward to 1970, okay? In 1970, there was a general overview of what the mission and the purpose of community action was going to be. So it gave us just some additional clarification about what the role of the network might look like. And again, community action agencies at this point, we had a cabinet level position with the Economic Opportunity Act, so things were pretty close to the president. You know, they were having a lot of federal regulations. We had a lot of different community action agencies spread throughout the United States. So we get this additional direction in 1970 that really helps solidify our mission and our purpose. Again, we're building off of that framework of looking at family, looking at agency, and looking at community, okay? So it was all about how are we going to mobilize our community resources to best meet the needs of those we're trying to serve. And in this, as you can see on participant manual page 2 here, you see that our focus continued to have, you know, getting people to be more self-sufficient. So moving from dependency to independence in terms of, you know, the assistance that people get. With community, we're going to look at mobilizing those community resources. How can we leverage what we have to best optimize what we want to be able to give? So that's partnerships, that's collaboration. And then we look at the agency part. And the agency part is really critical. It's something we'll come back to over and over, and it's morphed a little bit over time, but still the principles have remained the same. We have to be accountable. As taxpayers, as practitioners within this field, we have to be accountable for the outcomes that we are able to accomplish. And in 1970, they really wanted to reiterate that that was a critical part. Okay? So the other thing that's interesting is that this memo from 1970, Donald Rumsfeld and Dick Cheney were both really early supporters of this. So it's important for us to recognize that we've had some bipartisan support from the beginning, which is kind of, I think that that's a unique thing that sometimes we don't think really happened. So moving on to participant manual, page 3, we're going to talk about 1974. What happened in 1974, looks like we have some late joiners here. Come on in. So we have 1, 2, and 3 additional spots. Go ahead and grab your manuals, which are on your seats there. We are recording this, so we're all recording right now. So we're going to have you guys just kind of jump in. We've got a pretty tight agenda today in terms of what we need to accomplish. So right now we are on page 3 of the participant manual. So does everyone have a manual?
Yep.
Okay. So on page 3 there, we have some additional information. This is in 1974. So what happened is in 73, Nixon's budget was going to totally zero out Community Action Partnership. It was going to get rid of that Economic Opportunity Act. But Gerald Ford came into office, congressional support really swelled, and they said, you know what, let's start this Office of Community Service. It's not going to be a cabinet level position anymore. It's going to move a little bit further away from the president's control and put a little bit more ownership on the states, but let's continue on. So even though we changed our name from Economic Opportunity Act to the Office of Community Service, that mission and that purpose remained the same. It was still those 3 critical points that we've talked about: agency, family, community, self-sufficiency, improving communities. So that's kind of what happened with that. The name changed, everything else stayed the same. We fast forward to 1981. In 1981, what happened is we got the Community Services Block Grant. The Community Services Block Grant is money that's allocated for community action partnerships to mobilize and to provide services. So with this, again, what happened is we stepped further away from that federal control and we gave it to the state. We said instead of the feds giving this money to community actions directly, we're going to give it to a fiscal intermediary, and that's going to be the state. So the state is going to oversee what's happening. They're going to collect data. They're going to tell the feds what's going on. So we're moving a little bit more to a localized approach, which is the goal of what community action is. Community action really is our opportunity to look at community needs and to respond with a plan that works well for our community. So that's 1981. We got to cruise along to page number 4 here. Could I get somebody to read the first paragraph there under Congress passed Government Performance and Results Act?
Sure. The purposes of this act are to improve federal program effectiveness and public accountability by promoting a new focus on results, service quality, and customer satisfaction.
Great.
And to help federal managers improve service delivery by requiring that they plan for meeting program objectives and by providing them with information about program results and service quality.
Okay, awesome. So again, what this was this idea that we needed to have a greater level of accountability. We needed to establish some performance goals. They needed to be objective. They needed to be quantifiable. We have to have some performance indicators so that we know what it is that we're measuring. And we have to be able to compare what we project we're gonna do with what we're actually doing. And with that comparison, we have to be able to validate our results, which you validate that by collecting good data and being able to analyze it. In 1994, again, this is a lot of timeline stuff. It just kind of brings us up to pace of where we are right now. We'll get into more interactive stuff as we move forward. But in 1994, there was a monitoring, assessment, and task force that was created. And so this was an amendment to the CSBG Act, and what it did was, again, push that focus of measuring those outcomes for those 3 different levels of service that we're gonna provide: family, agency, community. So with this, out of that period, we established 6 goals. And these 6 goals were really derived from talking to people within the network. So we were talking to people who are on the ground floor. So people are in weatherization, people at the front desk, executive directors, state officers, federal, people that receive these reports, coming together with things that seemed like, yeah, this matters, this is important, these are the things that we need to target, and we established 6 national goals. So you'll see these goals as they're spelled out on page 5 here, but we also have them posted up on the wall. Again, these all relate back to the 3 different levels that we've talked about, so agency, family, community, okay? In 1994, what happened is we get introduced to the idea of Roma. Okay, Roma really is a conceptual framework that helps us make sure that we're managing and we're able to produce the accountable outcomes that we're searching for. So at this point, what happened is that it was all done on a voluntary basis. Roma started being introduced as this idea that we could qualify or quantify the results that we were doing, but this was completely voluntary at this point. And so Roma stands for Results-Oriented Management and Accountability. This concept started to build. As we move forward with 1996, as you'll see on page 7, we saw that the Office of Community Service started getting really interested in what these community action agencies were doing, and they said, well, we want to be part of this Roma conversation, but we need to have a standardized way to make sure that people across the network, from the state of Montana to the state of New Jersey, are getting the information in a uniform way, because that's where we gain our strength. We gain our strength from taking local situations, translating that to national language, and being able to report that to the federal government. So the Office of Community Service said, we want to be involved with this, but we have to have some tools that are going to work for that. So they gave us the awesome logic model, and today, this is just your preview. Okay, we're going to come back to this throughout the day. We're going to build a logic model as we move forward. Cool? Any questions? 6 seconds. Okay, so we're going to move forward. Again, this is pretty dense here, a lot of information. Let's move on to page 8. In 1998, there was reauthorization of the CSBG Act. And this was really our first, and the other thing is this is the last reauthorization. We've been operating on continuing resolutions since then, but this is the first place where Roma was really defined, and it wanted for us to identify and measure, analyze all of our results, including the number of people that we were serving. So it really defined, gave us some definition of what exactly we needed to report out on. So then in 2001, we knew based off of this legislation in '98, this was coming. Okay, in 2001, now you have to be able to report out. So our network is really rad in that we, again, talked with all of these different players who had been measuring outcomes on different levels, and we got a lot of network buy-in for people to say, you know what, these are the things that matter, these are the things that we think are important, and that really helped, because when you have buy-in in a system versus having some external, funding stream mandate that you do something, that buy-in really helps give you that strength that you need to be effective with the outcomes you're trying to accomplish. So we got that in 2001 through this IM 49. They defined to us that we had to be able to implement Roma and the core activities that assist in mandatory reporting and performance. In 2001, we also see here that we wanted to see how programs interact, so we don't just want siloed information. We want to see how programs interact to achieve outcomes, how putting multiple services for particular families, how that can optimize the outcomes. And it really was this this focus on looking at the effectiveness of what we do, the changes that we accomplish, because that's really what outcomes are, is long-term change in the clients that we serve. So that's in 2001, just a really big focus on making sure that those are key points that we're weaving in. So it wasn't just a suggestion at that point. They were like, you're gonna do it, which is okay, because as a network, we had always kind of been doing it, but it's been you over here and us over here and them over there. And this brought together just a standardized way for all of the agencies across the country to come together. There's about 1,000 community action agencies, more than that really. So this is a really important piece of that conversation. We have to have universal language in order for Congress and in order for the public to see the value of what it is that we're doing. So again, what we're wanting is that agency, client, the agency, family, and community outcomes. We're emphasizing long-term change, positive impact, improving our communities. In 2005, we developed the National Performance Indicators. Again, this was just a conversation that took place with people across the field. This is on page 10 of your participant manual. So throughout the field, people are coming together, they're having these conversations. These National Performance Indicators were the things that people recognized as being important. These were parts of the story that we needed to be able to tell. The National Performance Indicators has been what we report out on, if anyone's been around for the IS report. So that happens every spring. Patrick, gets all of the data collected. We input this information based off of these National Performance Indicators, and then we provide reports about our, independent outcomes and different things that we've been able to accomplish as an agency. Okay? Up to that point, we'd had voluntary systems of reporting. So because they'd been doing that for a while, we were able to see, some of the information they were collecting was valuable and some of it just needed to be improved or totally, just wasn't something that made the final cut with the National Performance Indicators. Okay, so moving forward, we see that, in 2005, we have the implementation of these National Performance Indicators. Again, we're just trying to improve conditions, make communities better and stronger. And in 2006, what happens is we get to develop this Roma cycle, okay? And so the Roma cycle is really awesome. You have it there in your book. We have it up on the wall. But this is cool because it's not just about reporting. That's not what Roma is about. It's not about getting those numbers to give to the feds to satisfy a mandate. It's about looking at the entire process of how we get to a place where we have good outcomes and good data that reflects the long-term change that we're striving to accomplish. Cool? Okay, So in 2009, Obama comes into office, and actually community action kind of got called out pretty early. And he said, you know what? We need to see you be more accountable. You need to be more accountable with the way that the money is being used. And so as a